Welcome everyone, I'm the captain, Ross Memphis Pambra. With me as always is my friend and the co-host, the president, Lawrence Gervais. We're broadcasting from Calgary, Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We would also like to acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. We would like to thank all of our First Nation friends, Métis settlements, and to all of our Métis brothers and sisters and families. We'd like to give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for the time she allows us to be here and use and share her bounty. And now, folks, from the captain and the president, let's get the wheel squeaking. Welcome, folks, to the Squeaky Wheel. With me, as always, is my very good friend, the co-host, the president, Lawrence Gervais. Folks, I'm Ross Memphis Pambra. Thank you again for always joining in to participate here in our conversation, where we have our conversation with a Métis perspective. Lawrence, we've been at this now for quite a while. Pandemic is finally coming through to the spot where we're starting to see that there's a good opening up. Still struggles throughout Canada when it comes to, for example, our prairie provinces, Manitoba having a difficult time. We're seeing a lot of adjustments in how we allow our municipalities to open, try to be, there's a lot of negative press when it comes to, we're opening too soon, we're fighting, we're trying to achieve too much too quickly. But when you look at the models that are happening down in the US, there's, we're trying to make inroads. I know that we're going to be having a whole number of conversations today, Lawrence, as we always do, where we're sharing, polite, fun conversation. We have challenging conversation. We're going to hit on some sports. We're going to definitely talk about some of the regional things that are happening. But Lawrence, I think it's important that we make a reference right off the bat to a challenge that's, I think a lot of Albertans, a lot of the Métis citizens, First Nations, residential schools. And though I don't like to start off always, with the heaviest hitting topics, I don't think this is one that can be ignored. I think it's important that we have a respectful conversation about this historic time. And I know you talk a lot, you present a lot. Maybe can you give us a little bit of more background for our listeners on how and why we're still exploring the history, and with the loss of these, or the loss of 250 children or 215 children that they've just found the remains of locally in the Western province of Kamloops. How do we come to terms more with our relationship with our government and with our citizens?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to, bring condolences to those families, at least the ones that might know about it. When they find a huge, burial site of 215 children, at Kamloops, kind of takes you back to what the Truth and Reconciliation meant. And, those 94 calls to action, which the government is sort of limited on how much they're acting on currently, which is just a critique from myself. It does bring us back a little bit, and back to that corner of what was discussed when the TRC commissions were going through. We know, even through Dr. Peter Bryce and his findings in the early 1900s, to the government not listening to his recommendations back then, and certainly Cindy Blackstock bringing that to a national attention just in the last while. Certainly it brings us back to that there was extreme conditions in those schools that were definitely reported to Canada at that time, while the residential schools were in place. And certainly Canada kind of ignored those recommendations, and the minister at that time, Duncan Campbell Scott, kind of had his own opinion on how to, in his words, rid the Indian problem. And certainly using the children as a vehicle to actually do that was just a Certainly something that I present when I talk about in my presentations. I've always talked about Dr. Peter Bryce since I've been doing it for the Métis Nation, because I think it's a good standing point on how the government kind of perceived those policies and moving forward, especially when they made residential schools mandatory, even after Dr. Peter Bryce's recommendations.
I was reading an article a little earlier, and it talked about in September of 2019, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal had found they'd reached a landmark decision when it had found that between 40 and 80,000 First Nations children were deprived of public health services and were wrongfully removed from their families between 2006 and 2017. This is still a plight, and it's a blight against our Canadian government system. That when we're looking back of Paul Henderson Bryce, he was the first chief medical officer at the Department of Interior in 1904. That this attention to the lack of service to an Indigenous population, and yet here we are still. And I think a lot of us are making comment. A lot of people make comment that we'd like to see more. When something's been acknowledged, something's been recognized, and we move forward. And though I wholeheartedly agree that we will move forward, we do need to move forward. It's strong reminders of the fact that these recent discoveries identify that there hasn't been enough conversation. There hasn't been enough awareness. There hasn't been enough education, because here we are still seeing in 2019 that we haven't necessarily moved forward where we actually worked to solve the problem. We're still finding more history. And I just want to recognize that there was, if you think of the 215, bodies of these young children, the number of families that have been haunted by the loss. And, I hope the generations continue to find closure, because it's a sad chapter in our history, in Canadian history.
Yes, and it is that call to action to Canada. I think we might have lost a seat at the UN table because of our relationship to Indigenous people. Certainly, that stuff has to be reminded to us, even as we get ahead into another election. Is that how we understand that we put these people in these roles to really have true reconciliation with Indigenous groups? And you're right, moving forward is definitely one of them. But in order to move forward, we need to have a strong base to actually do that. And we did with those TRC commissions. So that's sort of the only thing that we can possibly think of, some type of solution to how we're thinking. But also Canada needs to understand that there's a history there, and we can't just ignore it. It's not some fairy tale founding of this country. There was a lot of things that did happen, even to our Métis Nation, to our First Nations, but certainly there were these things that happened. Those certainly have to be the focal point and not pushed out of curriculum the way Alberta government does. We can't forget about this stuff. It's just one of those sad realities that we just have to deal with.
Yeah, and I've never been the biggest fan of the line that if you forget history, you're doomed to repeat it. I find, and as much as I love and respect cliches, that one seems to just constantly fall on deaf ears. And I hope that the government hears from this message again. Bring Indigenous peoples to all conversations. And this is how you will continue to foster a relationship with all Canadians.
And plus, we have to remember, this is one school. Now, when they put ground penetrating radar in a lot of the other schools, I'm pretty sure that number is gonna climb, and that's something that we have to be ready for.
Yeah, and maybe that's one of the strengths of our conversation, is that we're bringing some awareness, and as we move forward, both you and I in our conversation and learning, and we share this with others, that they understand that they will move forward the same as we're trying to build strength in moving forward through these conversations. let's jump on to a few more things, Lawrence. In some of the successful stuff that's happening in our region right now. Let's talk a little about our clinic. It's in fact happening pretty much as we speak.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. Well, we know we're only certainly weeks away from second doses in our community because a lot of the first is pretty running dry. I mean, I think currently this is what day is this? May 30th.
May 30th, yeah.
I think we're at about 2,700,000 first doses. So we know there's a lot of people waiting in line for the second. So, when we host a clinic this late, certainly we get a lot of second dose inquiries, right? When we're only doing first. So we just have to be cognizant of that, right? So, and be prepared. But I think we ran a really good clinic in our Calgary office, and we were pretty happy to have it all happen.
Well, and you and I, we comment and we have them as guests, right? Medical directors and our provincial political representatives. This, I think, was an incredibly successful contribution because, here we've been at the other Indigenous vaccination clinic that's been happening, very successful. I think the modeling that's happened, with groups such as ours and the other sort of Indigenous led vaccination clinics, we're seeing great success. We're seeing a connection with culture and a respectful connection. So good on you, good on us. It's finally getting people into the doors of our office that though the doors are there, the pandemic has sure created these emergency lockdowns have kept all of us from being in there, but I'm happy to see that it's being utilized. So for our first vaccination clinic, I wholeheartedly thank the volunteers. Thanks to Regan, as I mentioned, our medical director, who's big contributor to our podcast. Thank you to these folks and their connection with AHS so that we can move forward and offer such a great service.
Yeah. And then we're looking forward to the future because now, once you get the first, we're only halfway through. We know more clinics are going to happen, but at least we know how to do them now. And that's the big hurdle.
And funny, our conversation often, we banter and we tease each other about everything, but with a strong sense of humility. My first shot, I was a bit, hesitant, or I was excited to get it, but a little nervous. How am I going to react? But I'm going to be positive. Well, the second shot, no big deal. As soon as they say, yeah, it's my time, I'm on my way in. So I think as much as our first uptake, the first shot for everybody was a big hurdle, I don't think the second shot will be too big of a hurdle for anybody. So I'm excited that we will get through that faster.
Yeah. And I hate people when they have a sense of entitlement, and then they come in through our door with high expectations. But, we certainly door the ones that are very grateful for getting it for sure.
Yeah. And now to jump onto another thing that's vaccine related is because in my case, on my first shot was AZ. And we've talked before about how everybody seems to have come up with their own name. Actually, one of the funniest things I've heard lately is that you can buy a t-shirt that says, for the ladies, instead of I'm a modern woman, it says I'm a Moderna woman. And there's also another t-shirt that says older and Pfizer. Oh, for the love of God. I think it's fabulous. But yeah, my first shot was AZ. Then the next thing they're like, well, some people do occasionally get blood clots from this. So let us know if anything happens to you within the first 20 days. Now I'm somewhat waiting on the opportunity to get my second shot of that. But they've recently said federally, well, that most of this vaccine that we have that's expiring tomorrow, well, it's actually, we're going to suggest it's not expired for another month. I don't know if that's like expired milk. I'm not too sure how that works. I sure hope it's not. I don't know if the nurse just sort of has a bit of a smell and goes, no, this one will be fine. But yeah, I'm hoping and I'm praying that all of the right people to make the best decisions and the data, which I think the data supports the decisions that are out there. But let's hope the opportunity for whoever needs to get their second shot of AZ gets it. Otherwise, they're going to have to come up with the next recommendation. Get Pfizer or your second shot's going to be Moderna, and maybe even need a third shot as a result of it. But I like to think that we're moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from what I read, we're getting, all four eventually. Once they figure them out.
That's true.
So you'll be getting AZ, I'm sure, anytime soon. As soon as they open up that second dose, you never know what the government has.
Well, that's true. And when the needle ends up being, the size of my thumb because it's got about 17 different vaccines in it, might as well throw the flu shot in there as well, I guess. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Then we're going to definitely have sore arms. Let's jump on to something fun, Lawrence. Well, not necessarily fun. We do tend to like talking chuck wagons, but the Stampede's making a pretty good hard drive in order to be open and have a certain percentage of attendance that's making its way through. But now you're reading, and hey, we love chuck wagons. What happened there? Why?
I don't know
why aren't they allowing them
in?
in?
It just seems like they have a big hate on the chuck wagons. I don't know why. It seems they made rule changes after rule changes, and then this happens where they just decide just to cancel it, but then keep the rodeo going, right?
Yeah.
And I don't understand that concept. I mean, are we going to catch COVID watching four horses roam around the arena? You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
and actually, I think they were reducing that to 3,
yeah.
and then they were reducing down to 3 teams. And why can't we make it just a spectator sport and not maybe worry so much about the GMC rangeland part of it? Make it, but at least keep it there.
Yeah.
Because my concern always is, and this is with utmost respect to the Stampede, but they eventually just keep rolling over until eventually, what's it just going to be? Corn dogs and mini donuts? Like, I hope we continue to, embrace the cultural allowance that I think, has been granted and garnered to this province for a long, long time.
Well, if they're so worried about these horses getting hurt, if they're not consistently exercised with, consistent races, they will get hurt. And that's the bottom line. And, even what's going to hurt now is the economics of racing, because they do rely on the tarp sales or the auctions. They do rely on certainly winning if they get to those stages. But certainly there's a lot put in these horses and a lot of money spent. And if there's not enough available to them to make, well, we're going to lose teams right and left too.
Yeah. And folks, for all of you who end up wanting to send an email, tsw@métis3.org. I get it. There's definitely no shortage of Humane Society people out there who are always looking for something to complain about. And yet I don't see them flying to the other side of the world, saving every frog and gopher that they can. These people, folks, the chuck wagon owners, the chuck wagon families, take better care of their animals than you do of your own family. So you want to be angry at anybody, you just look to your own family and say, these people are taking good care of their animals. I know that for sure. And they've got a lot of heart and soul and family invested in that. And I'd like to continue to see that sport builds. And I just think it's time that we need to say, you go ahead if you want to be upset about something, but seems like a lot of the humane societies that have never even been here throw a lot of glass rocks in glass houses.
Yeah. And, the combination of having the chuck wagons with the show afterwards, I mean, that was a perfect fit. But now they're just going to focus on the show and still get an audience. So all the best to them. I mean, that's the decision they made. And then certainly what the Stampede's going to look like too, with limited capacities and having the midway there, which is great. But certainly losing an aspect of that Western thing, which is based on the rodeo and the truck wagons, it just doesn't gel too much with me, but whatever.
Yeah. And let's hope that they continue to find revenue, in a different way. And if that means that they're running it at a different location and that's where we may have to go in order to see it, well, I guess as the consumer, we get to pick and choose. And if that means we're going to another community, well, I'd be happy to go there.
Yeah. And, there is a lot of, through the truck wagon circle, there's a lot of other tournaments that are happening to kind of assist with the drivers. And we know the South League and the North League are kind of gelling together to look at Lloydminster as a possible place, and wish them all the luck having this big North American championship up there. So
Yeah. Now, speaking of families, as I was throwing that around, Blue Jays. Let's talk a little bit of other sports. Blue Jays, they went on a tough, got beat up pretty good. And then they started a few wins, put a few back to back. But the thing I really wanted to point out that I thought was delightful was here it's graduation season for our, grade 12ers. Congratulations to all of you. As I often mention, when you're looking to the next stage of your life, make sure you look at Rupert's Land Institute. There is so much great opportunity and funding when it comes to opportunities for our Métis students and for any age. But in the case of Charlie Montoya, he's the general manager, the coach coach manager for the Blue Jays. Well, he was doing an interview the other day, post-game interview, and he had to stop the press interview because he had to watch his son graduate. Now he had to watch it on computer. And for all those families who don't get to be there, they don't get that celebration. A lot of people are watching their families, their kids cross the graduation line. I thought that was kind of a neat story. Good on him. He put that family time, as it were, as a priority.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ceremony pictures that you see of kids just standing in front of a banner and giving the thumbs up. But that's the ceremony they have, right?
Well, I've always liked, because, usually at this time of the year, it's hard to find time with you, Lawrence, because you're at each one of these graduation ceremonies and being invited and watching these, successful Métis students who have graduated from SAIT and university and MRU and invited in all sorts of different ways for that celebration. It's just too bad, but we're going to get there, folks.
Yeah. I mean, I grab a sash, I put it around them, and I say, you're now interwoven in the community, and, and wish them luck. And then I go to the next, do the same thing. Right. But yeah, I mean, I miss those times, they put you on the Jubilee stage, or they put you in a gymnasium or some big hall and get to do and they feed you. So I'm missing those days. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's probably one of the best parts of it. I wanted to throw out the idea, still talking a little bit about sports. I'd like to see your opinion on, right now, it seems like what I'm reading a lot about, and definitely reading a lot about in tennis, is athletes, and even definitely pro basketball players, and often even NHL hockey players, they're getting questioned about the media, not just about sport, but about everything that's happening in our world. And I think it seems like I don't want to call it backlash, but a lot of the athletes are now, even some of them are putting up roadblocks and barriers saying, well, I'm not interested in talking to the media anymore. I am just an athlete here to do my sport. And I think it might be unfair, though they are so recognizable. It's easy to slip up and make a mistake in any word, any phrases. I constantly say it all the time. Folks, some point somebody's going to be offended here, but it's not coming from a position of trying to be offensive. I may just not know the whole story as well, just like anybody else. And these athletes who are, have million followers on their everything, their Instagrams and Twitters and such like that, and are constantly being asked challenging questions that they may not have an awareness about. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, if I was a professional athlete and I got the same inundate question over and over again, I would probably get a little irritated. And, like those NFL players that just get up to the mic and they just give you a one-word answer, and,
yeah,
they're just deadpanned, right? But yeah, I mean, it would probably be very frustrating to know absolutely everything about their sponsorship, about who's there and what they're doing. They just came to perform, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think we got to go a little easier on them, right? We used to get really mad at any rock star if he ever made a political comment, because what do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, Bruce Springsteen was big into making, taking liberty with his connection with the audience to say, hey, here's what should happen. I mean, the Dixie Chicks made one comment once that they were embarrassed that the president was from their home state. And I mean, they were shunned for a long time. Whereas now you look at what it seems athletes, what our television personalities, our movie stars, what they say, And I think, or I'm worried that it's, often will come back to haunt them, but they were never political analysts. They were never, historians. I caution people, but again, I always say I am on this journey to learn. And we put ourselves a little at risk when we try to share conversation, but, in their world, it just seems hard. And I hope the best for them. And I respect if they say, I'm not here to have this conversation at this time. I'm here to perform. Do you have any questions about, what's happening with my performance or around the sport that I'm in? If that's their answer, I got to be okay with it. I don't think it's fair for us to expect that they can answer everything.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, around politicians and, different types from Canada or Alberta, and you kind of, you go through your podium, you're at some other announcement. The reporters start asking a direct question to a premier that is not related to where we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you got to sit through that. Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes just reporters just use those things as an access point. And I'll ask this question, even though it's not related to the announcement that we're here today. But they're just like that.
Actually, that's a good point. They use it almost as an access point. And I agree. I don't necessarily always think that that's fair, because it comes out of context. And then the next thing you're having to defend something that they've just taken a small snippet of. And I think there's still, folks, for all of you who are journalists out there, I don't dispute that we need people in order to create accountability. But let's do it in a way that's fair. We're not trying to entrap people. We're trying to hopefully educate somebody, engage them in a conversation. But if they don't want to be in the conversation, then maybe it's okay to let them out.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're at a celebration or an opening or something, and then they want to, it's like a Debbie Downer. Then they want to talk about, something that's happened, and, within the cabinet, or it's just something that's totally unrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see more. We're going to see more sports athletes, I think, trying to utilize the time with the media less, because it just becomes, I think, a bit of a burden. And one of the sort of final things was the captain of the Love Boat. I guess that was probably late 70s, 80s. Gavin McLeod passed away. He was this sort of comedy actor, long history in television and movies. And I always loved The Love Boat, right? It was such a positive show. It had
there was some predator stuff in that show too, with the doctor drugging some of the, I think there's stories of him just having a good old time and partying and certainly leaving drinks for them with possible drugs in them.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I don't, it's so funny. It's been so long. And I guess I probably just saw it from very young eyes, was that, here it was, this nice clean boat and Gopher and Isaac, who, yeah, you're right. And the doctor and Julie and all these characters on the show. And yeah, I think if we look back, there's no doubt in my mind, we're going to see things from a different.
Sure. You could pick apart the Love Boat, because I remember the passenger used to come on and then they would comment about, which one was going to get action that day, right?
Yeah, so. That's right. Yeah, nowadays, you probably couldn't get away with anything like that.
But it had that swinging 70s thing too, the Love Boat, right?
Yes. Yeah, almost at the same time as the, what was the island? What was the other one?
Fantasy Island?
Fantasy Island, yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Guaranteed. Folks, it harkens back to a time when, I guess that was before us, but that was the swinging 70s and what was happening. But again, in jest and in the humor of everything, if it comes from a spot where hopefully it's still positive, folks, sometimes we got to let things roll off our backs. But yeah, it was when I saw him, it just reminded me of those times. But it's funny, some of the, the things that you point out. Lawrence, I think that's all the time we have today. I appreciate always our conversation. You always make me laugh. I think it's inspiring, our conversation, both for, I know for you and for myself, that we're always learning a little bit more. I appreciate the time that you share. I appreciate that, we have this time to gather, that Mother Earth shares her bounty with us. And folks, make sure you reach out to the youth. Make sure you connect with our elders. There's a lot of great wisdom there. Lawrence closes out on this absolutely wonderful sunny day happening here in Southern Alberta.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Summer's getting warmer. Hydrate, get vitamin D, wear your sunscreen. I'm not your parent, but certainly I'm pretty sure you know that. And if you want your second dose, just be patient. It'll come. I'm guessing in a little bit of time. Probably when this airs, there's going to be an announcement.
Always the adult. Folks, make sure you click that little red box in our when you're watching this on YouTube to subscribe. It always helps us when we share our conversations with our sponsors and with our guests and with the people that we connect with. Email us, tsw@métis3.org. Find us at métis3.org. Make sure you check out albertamétis.com in order to find out a lot of the things that are happening around the province, and stay connected within your Métis community. From the Squeaky Wheel, from all of us here, thank you for jumping on.